of 2017, Neumann Monson Architects made client experience their primary corporate objective, and they are investing in the effort to get it right. Tim's balance of tenacious drive and empathetic listening has provided purposeful and influential leadership at Neumann Monson for the past 24 years. Promoted to president in 2018, his focus is to set strategic direction and convert the talent and drive of their team of professionals into impact for their clients, partners, and communities. Sally is an architect and shareholder with the firm. For the past 9 years, she has sought opportunities to influence an outward focus that aligns with the firm's values and design excellence. Welcome.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for that introduction, Ryan. This is Sally, as you know, and I'm Tim, and we're going to talk about, who we are and where we are on this CX journey. So after that, Sally's going to lead us through an interactive session, and this is going to get crazy. And then we're going to circle back and talk a little bit about what we've learned thus far in our journey before we get to questions and discussion, and hopefully we have plenty of time for that. The reason we're talking is because CX is our number one priority, obviously. Sally, she came to the CXps conference last year and brought back a lot of information and trends that helped make that a decision for us. But also, we're in an increasingly competitive environment where it's harder and harder to differentiate ourselves. So that was an important factor in our decision to make it our number one priority. But and when we did that, it was last fall, our entire team stood in unanimous support of that. But if you go back 6 years prior at our first all-office retreat, that was the first opportunity the entire team had to give input on what is the direction of our team's future as a company. And the leadership of the team was a little bit anxious to get all that input from the team. We didn't know what was going to come of it. So we tried to manipulate the outcome a little bit. And we were naive. It backfired. But the night before that initial retreat, each of the directors stood up and gave a heartfelt presentation on how important the client is. And of course, at that time, we didn't have a clue what CX was, but we knew the client was important because we wouldn't have an office if it weren't for our clients. So how did we get from 2012 with no alignment and a big chasm between leadership and our team to where we were in at that retreat in 2017 and now? That's what we're going to talk to you about. So first, a little about us. We're coming to you from Iowa, and we have offices in Iowa City, Iowa, that is a progressive college town. We hear it's a lot like Durham from some of the people around here. We have 36 people in that office. That was where we were founded. In Des Moines, we have 11 people. Des Moines is the capital of Iowa. So those are two fairly urban areas. In between those two, you would find a lot of this. And spotted with abandoned barns, but we have a relationship with the barns. We think they're very important. They feed our ideology. We feel that ideology is a lot about authenticity. It is a lot about pragmatism. And when we go to solve a problem, we solve it in what we hope is an innovative way and not settling for the status quo. But we also solve it in the simplest way possible. Our mission statement, this was all released last fall along with our strategic plan. And the key thing to remember, we'll circle back to this, but the key thing to remember is we drive positive change. So we try to, through what we do, elevate the human experience, and through this work, I hope you can see some of that simplicity of ideology that we're just talking about. Here's our team in front of one of our net zero energy buildings, and we tend to wear a lot of black and gray, sometimes blue, and I guess that's just a
not a lot of color in
designer
this
thing.
in design world.
But a Myers-Briggs assessment of our team categorize most of us as ingenious problem solvers that struggle to relate and build trust. So why the hell would we need a client experience program? So, but we must be highly functioning because we're doing pretty well. This is our 40th year. We've had a growing passion for what we do amongst our team. To celebrate our 40th year, we had 40 acts of kindness. That was 40 group volunteer events where our team volunteered and tried to help out in our community. And in the end, we went well above 40, and we still have that momentum moving us forward. So that it's very great. We have a better and better reputation amongst our community every day. So that's going strong. Now, I'm going to talk about our 40 years. This is it in graphic form. Our team's growth here in the darker blue, sitting just below 50. We're not a huge organization. And our financial success in the light blue. After 2007, we had a slight recovery. Well, maybe a bigger recovery, but we've been on the upswing ever since then. So things are going well, but we want to keep that trajectory. Now, what we're going to focus on is this last 6 years of that transition between those two retreats. And, you know, we didn't know what was happening at the time. We're trained as architects, not business people. So we just knew it was a little bit scary and painful when it was happening. But what we realize now, looking back, is, you know, we had our two founders, Roy Neumann and Kevin Monson, that had been the leadership of the firm. And we needed to move on to something else. We realized now, and during that whole time, up until 2012, we worked in the business. We did not work on the business at all. So it was a total focus in the business, in the projects. What we now know is that we were moving, it was a transition from being founder-led to purpose-led during that 6 years. And I'll break this down as quickly as I can, but not only have we, that's Evan trying to psych us out. All
right, good.
So not only have we gone from founder-led and owned by few, we've gone to purpose-led, owned by many. We added 2 directors in 2013. We now have 6. And we've added 13 shareholders since then. Sally's one of them. And so that's really broadened the base of leadership within the team. We've gone from siloed, what we internally classify ourselves as siloed and opaque, to one team that is transparent. The first step in that was to find somebody to work on the business. And I was the lucky guy that got to do that. Yep. But I of course didn't do it on my own. It was all part of the team. Everybody was in support of it. One of the things we did right off the bat was eliminate the studios. We had each of our directors operating in separate office, basically, under one roof. So we eliminated that, and I tried to operate things. We used our Deltek Vision software more to operate things as one team and just plan teams around projects. So we opened up all project financials. And made the teams responsible for managing those financials. Before that, the teams didn't have a clue what the financials were. To balance that, we moved our retirement program to a profit-sharing program, so everybody had a vested interest in our financial success. These seem like no-brainers, right? But I don't know. And then we tried to educate people. So we circulated books. One that everybody in our office just volunteered to read was The Oz Principle. And that talks about accountability and taking ownership of your own place. And then one of the things we did to make everybody realize change was here and it was staying was we lopped off all the partitions in our office to just above desk height. So that really changed that made it transparent, literally. So our office was categorized as disorganized and haphazard. Now we're more standardized and aligned. One of the first things we did, we heard from our team that day after the director said, the client's important, the team said design is important. We did make design important. And today we're the most awarded firm for design in Iowa and the Central States. So we made that an important thing that people bought into and took ownership of. We set some standards. We didn't have any standards of any kind at that time. And so we started making standards. We didn't have a quality assurance program. And now at this point, we have an amazing quality assurance program. And contractors talk about how our documents stand above our competition. One of the changes that really fueled ongoing improvement was improvement lunches. If somebody had an initiative to improve Neumann Monson and wanted to meet as a group over lunch, dedicate their lunch to it, we bought the lunch. And then we kept on refining our design process. But then last fall, we started measuring our improvement in these areas. We started the GAP-M, which is 33 metrics taken quarterly by our entire team that measures how we are aligning, how engaged is the team, all these factors.
How satisfied employees are.
Yes. How willing is an employee to go out and sell Neumann Monson to somebody else. And we've been on an upward trajectory with that since then. So we were categorized as reactive and unplanned. As you can see, we probably weren't. And now we're feeling more proactive and strategic. So those retreats, we've had 6 of them so far, and those have helped push our progress, and they've helped celebrate our progress. And this last fall, the strategic plan, CX, as the #1 priority. Now we move into implementation of that. We initiated 5-person action planning teams to figure out how this was going to roll out. We started looking at, where are we now versus where we want to be, and dissecting that. But we still didn't really have a good concept in our head of what CX was. So Sally, as she had been the whole year, fed us some information about the speakers at CXps, and Stephen Keith was one of those. We reached out to him, and lo and behold, he was coming to Iowa City the next week. So we had him in to tell us about CX, and then we hired them to do an initial pilot to help us with action planning. And that's Stephen there beside me.
Also in the back of the room.
Then we had a client kickoff, and we were able to get that going before the Christmas holiday. And we had 12 members of our team participate in that, and one of the greatest eye-openers was to have the client journey mapping as part of that process, and to start to see the world through the client's eyes. So CX pilots, as we hired them on for a year's time, we wanted to do an aggressive implementation of this, so we wanted to do it in 12 months. They created this roadmap that outlines the 12 months are across the width of the page. Each of the gray rectangles is an activity or a pilot that we incorporate into what we do at Neumann Monson. Along the left-hand column, you see the colored rectangles. Each green colored rectangle is a strategy that we're going to incorporate at Neumann Monson, and those are specifically catered to us in what we need to do. Each one of those green rectangles has an accompanying purple rectangle, which are the measures of that strategy, so we can monitor our progress. And each strategy has an accompanying blue rectangle representing the governance that will be put in place to perpetuate that success into the future. So we are there, quarter of the way through, and so far we've established communication lines and a cadence of communication, so our team hears this on a regular basis and they don't forget about it, they keep it top of mind. There's been a lot of research done by CX pilots. They've done Bo has done all the phone interviews with many of our clients, and not just the clients we have, but clients that didn't pick us. We've gathered a bunch of data from inside the firm and given it to them to process, and we've looked at external resources of data to analyze. In addition to that, we've had 2 opportunities so far to engage our entire team, and that was to design an ideal client profile. So our entire team now has a good sense, a shared sense of what is the client we're looking for out in the future. And we also engaged the entire team to create a CX charter that is kind of gets everybody's buy-in around CX at Neumann Monson. And that we're just getting ready to finally publish that and release it to the team. Another thing we're doing right now, and this is a challenging process for us, but it is to analyze our actual process, which can go on for a long time and has many touch points along the way. So we map out every time we interact with somebody along what can be an 8-year process, and then that forms the backbone of what will be our roles, responsibility, and accountability, all wrapped around CX. So, the team involvement is gradually ramping up. That's in the lighter blue. We'll have everybody working on this eventually every day and thinking about it and what they do. We have involved everybody in a couple of sessions twice already. The workload, as far as our implementation, is just about to peak. But we're already we're really chugging at this, and especially CX Pilots is really working on this. We're keeping them on their toes. We're 80% on schedule, but they assure us we're going to get caught back up. So that's where we are. Sally?
All right, yeah, so that's a little bit about us and our story of where we got, or how we got through the last 6 years to here. So now we're just going to take a little time out and go into a little bit more interaction. How many of you have ever done a force field analysis or something similar to that? There's probably some different words out there about what it is. Well, don't be frightened by it. I don't know, no one's done that. No one. Okay, well, force field analysis is really a real simple process. It can be as high level or as down to the detail as you want it to be. But the objective of it is really to understand what are your restraining forces from keeping you from getting something to where you want it to go, and then what are the driving forces that can combat those restraining forces. So if you each just think about what your CX initiative might be in your own organization, or if you're just looking to start one, or anything of that matter, preferably something around CX. If you think of that individually for your organization, what is keeping it in the status quo state? What is keeping it, what are the restraining forces holding it back there and not allowing it to move forward into the desired state that it wants to be? So we'd like you to actually there's some Post-it notes on the tables. We probably should have put more markers out. Feel free to use pens if you have them and things, but we wanted you just individually think about your own organization, and whether it's a very specific CX initiative or a whole program in general, what are some of the things that are keeping you from moving that forward? And write them out on some Post-it notes, because we're not going to do it right now because we have kind of a large group, but eventually we're going to post all these things up here on the front of the wall. So one of the keys as you're thinking and things, one of the keys to all of this is certainly you can do this individually in your own organization, right? But it's a great process really to bring in more people, get more engagement from your teams of whoever that might be, or even your entire team, depending on the size of your organization. And it really gets a lot of buy-in and engagement going. So think of a few things. I mean, one simple thing might be, hey, I don't have the financial resources to start something new right now, right? That's a real kind of no-brainer sometimes for some people. Yeah, I was going to say, while you're thinking and writing down a few different things, we'll share a few that we came up with, and there's definitely, an endless number of things that can keep you from moving forward, right? But one of them we had was no uniting purpose. What was really uniting us to help move something forward? That was a pretty big foundational thing. Tim spoke a lot about that early on. We didn't have really that foundational purpose, really almost in uniting anything we did. How about just team buy-in? You know, just simple as that. We don't have the team buy-in on this right now. We are designers. We went to school to be architects. You know, we don't know anything about the CX stuff. I'm supposed to do this? What is this? You know, that can be a restraining force. What is CX anyways? What is this acronym CX? What does that stand for? Probably a year and a half ago, there weren't many people in our office that even had ever heard of that, to be honest. So it's really hard to move something forward if you don't know how to define it and explain it. Lack of alignment. Wow, we've been busy doing so many different things in our office to get them aligned. How does this fit into all of that? Is this a whole nother separate vertical? You know, is this something that, you know, does it align with everything else that we've been doing? What does that mean? So now, though, we want to switch into the other side of it. What are your driving forces? So what this means is, think about one of your restraining forces that you just wrote down. And what is something, it could be even really small and simple, what is something you could do to combat against that restraining force and move it back and move it forward, excuse me. What is something simple you might be able to do? Maybe it's even an innovative thing. And you might come up with several different things. And what happens is, when you start writing down what your driving forces might be to actually combat against that restraining force, you're starting to make an action plan of how to move forward. And it might be a pretty high-level action plan right now with not a lot of detail to it, but it starts the beginnings of something that you can start breaking down even further.
Desire to be different.
Yeah, it's motivation there, right? I don't want to be like everybody else. What's something else? We want to keep growing. We don't just want to stay in status quo, do we? So I'm not going to go into detail, really, of all of our driving forces right this moment, because actually the next slides are going to shift into that. But the 5 you see up there that we listed, those are basically more of that high-level kind of grouping that you could say that there's a lot of different details underneath each one of those. But ideology, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Power of feedback, expertise is relative, and opportunities for influence. So these were all items that, through our journey, that we found really helped us to move our CX initiative forward, but not just, I mean, this is not just a CX initiative. I mean, it could be any initiative, really, that you have going on as well, right? So to move forward, it was pretty, you know, with what we learned from each of those, it's really hard to distill down 6 years of work into like 5 topics. So it's certainly not we're still learning. But we felt these 5 were pretty relevant here for today, we hope you'll find. And you know, there's certainly more than just this, right? Ideology, very foundational aspect. Your business ideology of your company, very foundational concept here to what we're talking about. Who's heard of inside out as a business ideology? We did a lot of different research, kind of understanding what different business ideologies might be out there. There are certainly probably a number of them, but a couple of them kept coming up and coming to the surface, and one of them was inside out. If you hadn't heard of that before, that's really taking your inner strengths and capabilities of your organization and letting that create your decision making to make your organization prevail. So you're looking from the inside. What is your purpose of your organization? What is like, how do you find meaning? What is driving you forward? It's not so much about that client relationship at all. It depends a lot on having customer instinct to really be successful, because you're not really talking to the customer much about what their needs are, right? How many of you heard of Simon Sinek and his golden circle? Yeah, that's a fair amount of people have. So a lot of you have probably heard that, how he says it, that we all know what we do, like, hey, we design buildings, we're architects. Some definitely know how they do it. And we don't just mean what is your daily workflow of how you do things. We all probably know that, but what is really differentiating about how we're doing this? And very few really know why they do what they do. What is their purpose? What is that uniting purpose that is really uniting that entire organization and moving us forward? So then on the flip side of that, the second one is outside in. Now this is all about the customer, all about the relationship with the customer. From value creation to orientation to their experience, everything about what you're deciding to do within your business is coming from the outside, and you're making decisions and changes to the inside to help that. We'll go through just couple more examples here. Henry Ford. If I would have asked the customer what they needed, they would have said a faster horse, right? Sometimes the customer doesn't always know what is possible. So why wouldn't I help them get there? Why do I need to ask them if they don't know what's possible, right? He also said, any customer can have a car painted any color he wants, so long as it's black. So as designers and architects, as Tim mentioned before, we wear a lot of black and gray and blue, and so we relate to that one too. We don't need someone telling us what colors to use, right? Outside in, on the flip side, but sticking to the transportation theme, Southwest Airlines is successful because the company understands it's a customer service company. It just happens to also be an airline. All about the customer service. In fact, their motto is, without a heart, it's just a machine. They don't care so much about the plane as they do about the people inside of it. So we've got inside out on one end of the spectrum and outside in on the other. And some people might find themselves on one end or the other, but a lot of people find themselves somewhere in between. Like, where is that right balance? How does that really work? And we also believe that. We think we've come to believe at least, the most successful organizations really find what their right balance is of both inside out and outside in. And they're not just necessarily extreme on one end or the other. And it's where those things then can overlap to create your CX experiences that bring a lot more innovation and a lot more value, because you're not immune to hearing from one end or the other. You're not just focused on one side or the other. You're focused on how it can all come together and move you even further.
Next is seek first to understand and then to be understood. We're going to go back to this little timeline, that span of those 6 retreats, and the failed pitch the directors gave back in 2012, and then it ending in a unanimous successful launch with client experience as our #1 priority. Now, over here you see the little abbreviations. IO is inside out, and OI is outside in. A couple quotes up there, which I won't read. You can read those in your leisure. And at the time we were getting ready for that first retreat, the directors were trying to nudge this balance, this seesaw, over a little more toward the outside-in approach. But as that day went on of the retreat, that seesaw kind of broke in half. The team wanted to be inside out. The directors wanted to be outside in. So we had to go about fixing a big gap there. And we spent 2 years almost completely focused inside out, almost to the point where it was like a coffee shop. You know, you go into some coffee shops, they don't even know there's somebody there wanting the coffee. They're more interested in talking behind the counter, sort of thing. So anyway, we focused on that, but that was also an important time in our evolution, gathering input, finding our collective meaning, and then trying to distill that down. And by 2014, at that retreat, we had whittled that down into a statement of purpose, because we had different people that thought different things were important. A lot of them, as I noted, were focused on excellence, the second from the bottom, and focused on excellence in design. But they didn't care much about the other things. And there's other examples of that. But we put service at the top, but when we put these 7 pillars out there in front of the team, the message was that to be successful into the future, we had to collectively treat all of them with importance. So that was a key moment. It helped us build some momentum into the following years, where that seesaw started to creep back the other way. We were able to tip it back the other way a little bit. As we were leaving that 2014 retreat, Sally and I were sitting on the bus together. She leans over and says, "When are we going to start thinking about the client?" And it was a couple months after that we engaged CFT and launched that program. And that helped us immensely in giving our employees a sense of that other lens they need to look through. So, by the time we released our mission and values in 2017, at the end of 2017, what we're looking toward is balancing that seesaw. Our mission up there at the top that we put out. We may not be all the way there, but we're pretty darn close to having our why, how, what figured out. Our why is driving positive change. And how we do that is through better partnerships and through empowering our people, our customers, and our communities. And the partnerships behind that help us improve what we do, that design. The design excellence is what we do. So that's the thoughtful and relevant design solutions. And it's through better partnerships that we can drive positive change further. So I'm getting embarrassed at how bad we were back then. We had the traditional top-down review system, which everybody in the organization dreaded. Nobody wanted to do it. And at that first retreat, we got that flood of information back from the team, but a year later, there was still some residual information that hadn't come out, and it was the team had some things they wanted to say to each member of our leadership team. And so we opened this up and said, okay, we're going to have a bottom-up review. Everybody gets to say whatever they want about our leadership team, and it'll be totally anonymous, so nothing will come back. Let's just take it and improve from it.
Had a lot of courage and a lot of vulnerability to put themselves there.
We had that. And so we've initiated that. We saw how it propelled us forward, and we carried that to today, even though we've evolved it even more. But at that point, it was totally anonymous. I don't know if we could just open that Pandora's box without having it anonymous at that point. But we didn't want to be the only ones that got to enjoy that kind of feedback. So the next year, we incorporated it into our reviews of everybody. So now everybody, and it was still anonymous this time. We were using, I think, SurveyMonkey at that point. And it was, so we had a situation where everybody gets reviewed from above, from their peers, and from the people they're mentoring. So they get all of that and can learn from it, and they engage that. But that over the course of that next year, we had hired on Client Savvy and incorporated CFT into our projects. So people were learning the benefits of feedback in projects and seeing, bad feedback is a good thing, because then you can take it and build trust. You can act, if you act on it.
It's better than having no feedback.
Yes. So that was a big improvement, and by the next year, we were using Client Savvy as our platform for the 360 reviews, and we made those totally transparent, where they were no longer anonymous. So there was an evolution there, a little bit of a curve of development in that process. And we've engaged it ever since and tweaked it each year. But then, what this has done. We've seen it improve our trust, integrity, accountability, and the empowerment of our team. all focused on the whole time building better partnerships, better relationships throughout that process.
Expertise is totally relative, is something that we've learned. Basically, don't feel confident, or don't worry if you don't feel confident or feel like you know everything you need to know in order to move something forward, especially with CX. What this is really representing is that maybe your organization is at one level of their knowledge about CX and all of this. But you guys are all here. You know, you're either the champion of this in your outfit, or whatever reason it is that brought you here. Just like I came here last year, I gained more knowledge, and some would say that actually you only really need to know about 20% more than your audience in order to provide some meaningful influence.
That's probably not true today.
You probably know more than I do, but
I'm not saying that.
no. So the point is, you don't have to be an expert, right, to have some courage and to feel confident in order to move something forward in your firm. With that, one of my favorite mottos over the last year and a half I've come to like, don't worry, be crappy. It's okay. What this doesn't mean is produce crappy work. That's not what we're talking about, right? What it does mean is that don't wait for it to be perfect before you roll it out, before you release something. It's okay if you only get it to a point of like 60, maybe even 80% before you put something out there in front of everyone to get input. If you leave that room in there, that gap, that's a gap for everyone to help provide input and build buy-in and build that engagement, and to make it even better, because rather than you or a small team trying to reach for perfection before you go somewhere with it, let everyone be a part of it, because they're going to have some great ideas that you probably didn't think about, and you're going to get a lot further to a lot more innovation, a lot more value with everyone's mind on it, rather than waiting until you think you just have this perfect thing to release. So that's one of my favorites. And our last one is influence. So all along the way, we want to look for opportunities to influence. When we just learned, you don't necessarily have to be the expert to provide influence, right? So you can be the bottom-up influencer, just like we were in reviews and things of that nature as well. Go ahead and be a ground floor leader. So a couple of years ago, I helped offload some of Tim's tasks and became our champion for our client feedback tool program in our office. And we've been having bi-monthly CFT meetings. Now those meetings, we invite everybody in our organization to be a part of them. It's not just one small core team or anything. And we go through all the feedback in those bi-monthly meetings. We're transparent about all of it. We learn the lessons learned from each other, and we celebrate all the successes together. If anyone wants to be a part of those meetings, they are more than welcome to be a part of that. But when I came back last year from this conference, I used those meetings as well as an opportunity to start influencing and providing more information about the bigger picture of CX, right? It wasn't just about the CFT tool, not that that's not a critical part, because however you're getting your feedback or your voice of your customer program initiated is certainly very important. But there's this bigger picture out there that everybody needs to know about. Articles and informational posts, find different ways. I'm sure you gathered a lot of things here today and yesterday. And maybe other research you've done on your own. Find ways to get those out there in front of people. It doesn't have to even be in a formal way. It can be very informal. We have an intranet in our office, which we call Noodle. And on the face page of that, it looks a lot like Facebook, actually. So you have all these posts and different things on it. Maybe some of you have something like that, too. Great spot to put information and just kind of keep feeding things over the course of time. Create opportunities for dialogue. Where can you just bring this topic up a little bit more? In those informational posts on our intranet, there's spaces for comment and for dialogue to happen. But also one of the things that we did after coming back from here last year was I just sat down and said, hey, who wants to just join me for lunch and just talk about CX, right? We don't really know what it all means, but I'd like to hear about what all of you think it means, and what do you think it should mean for Neumann Monson? just so we met at least 3 times and just kind of started the dialogue going. We even took down information in minutes about that. So that just kind of got the words and the language out there a lot more, so that it wasn't some big subject that no one's ever heard of. So as you can see, most of this is really just about planting seeds, right? It's a very slow kind of thing where you're just very granularly, if I can talk, trying to plant those seeds. And it's not going to happen overnight. So just have some patience. Don't think you have to do it like overnight and have this moving forward in like a month, because that's probably not going to happen. Have patience about it. Plant seeds, watch them grow. And then, of course, there's still the top-down influence. We're fortunate enough, as you've heard along the way from Tim, that we have leadership with a lot of open-minded listening. And they've learned and honed in on those skills quite a bit. They've embraced our grassroots efforts that we've had within our firm. Because those grassroots efforts, they're important because they're stemming from passion. There's something behind those that could be carried a long way. So make sure you're really listening to those. And then industry trends was a big thing about how we were able to move forward in this past year and really put CX as our #1 critical objective on our plan. As me bringing back even more information from the conference last year that said, hey, this is a shift going on here. We got to get on this because we have learned as a firm we want to be way more proactive. We do not want to be that firm that's reactive and sitting there in that state. So we want to go ahead and be on the forefront of this and start leading those efforts. So that's all of them. Just to kind of recap, I guess ideology. Find your inside out and your outside in balance. Practice empathetic listening. Build up the trust and emotional bank accounts of your team. Allow feedback to empower you. Don't be afraid of that feedback. It belongs to the receiver, the power does. Have confidence. You don't have to know everything or be perfect. And find your opportunities to influence. Go plant your seeds and watch them grow. So that's really what we have prepared for you today.